Hi everybody, I'm Elle, I do digital art, and last week I made a skin tutorial where I drew this picture. And well, I said at the time that I had drawn her bald so that I could do a hair tutorial. Well, while I was filming it, I decided that it probably wasn't the easiest way to do a hair tutorial. I had made the decision to have her hair all windswept and blown up, and whilst it would be really good to film a tutorial on how to draw windswept hair, it wasn't exactly the best example on how I draw hair normally, so I decided to take one of my other characters and make her bald instead, and now I have filmed this. I hope you enjoy it, and yeah, here we go. I start by creating a layer behind the character, and this is going to be the back of the hair. I just block it in with a fairly opaque round brush. It's more about getting the shape correct than anything. I also create a layer above the character and do the same thing, just block in the shapes. So after I've blocked in the shapes and I'm happy with them, I change my brush to the Ross Draw Soft Paintbrush. If you can't afford his paintbrush set, there are a couple of default brushes in Procreate that you might be able to use instead. The closest brush that I could find was this abstract brush called Membrane, but I had to make a couple of changes to the brush settings, so here's a recording of that just in case you wanted to do it yourself and give it a go. Now the reason that I like using that brush in the first place is because it allows me to draw in some strands that are kind of wispy but not too detailed. You don't want to put way too many details in at the start because you might end up changing them, or you might have to paint over the top of them. Now create a clipping mask or alpha lock the layer and start painting in a brighter tone where the sun's going to be hitting the hair, trying to keep in mind that the hair wraps around the head, so it is a 3D object. You've got the front, the back and the sides. And hair is also pretty shiny, so I select a sort of muted green tone, and then I just paint it on the top of the head where the light's going to be reflecting off it from the sky. And now for the first time I add a layer above the clipping mask and I actually start painting outside of the original blocked in shapes that I had. Everything up until this point had been drawn within the original shapes that I blocked in. You really don't need to make things too complicated, just keep things simple and then you can add the details later. In the original piece she had this jewellery around her head, and all I did for that was I just used a round brush and blocked in some circles and added some brighter parts where the light would glint off it with the same circle brush, and just added some details for the jewel. And then I go through my layers and just turn them off one by one, and you can really see how every single detail that I've drawn in is really just anchored to those core blocky shapes that I had underneath. Now obviously this was a redraw. It's quite similar to the original that I made, but I obviously spent a lot longer on that original piece. But the idea is still there. You just start with your simple shape at the beginning to block in the shapes. Create a clipping mask or alpha lock the layer and just put in some gradients and some lighter colours and darker colours where the light and shadow is, and then you can select a nice hairbrush, put in some details, paint over the top outside of the clipping mask and just add some strands and stuff. You can also use some adjustment layers too, like I like the add layer and the colour dodge layer. Just add it where the lighter colours of the hair are, so where the sun's hitting it or a lighting element is hitting it. You don't have to overdo it. I also like to do some little strands of hairs, just using an add layer. It makes it kind of look like the sun's hitting off it, and if you look at hair in real life when the sun glances off it, you get all these little stray hairs going all over the place, so trying to replicate that can be tedious, but it's an optional thing, but I kind of feel like it adds to the piece. I just wanted to jump in and say that I'm now streaming on Twitch, so if you wanted to jump in on a stream, I've got my schedule up and it should adjust for your time zones, and it would be lovely to see you all there. Hopefully this tutorial wasn't too chaotic. I didn't script it and I think it kind of shows, but I would like to revisit all of these tutorials in the future anyway when I have a little bit more time to just thoroughly go over each of the steps. Yeah, next week I will have a video up on how I transitioned from line art to a more painterly style. Yeah, thank you for watching, and until next time, bye!